Are you looking for a mixer for your podcast or your live stream? In this video, I'm comparing the Rodecaster to the Mackie DLZ. I have the Rodecaster Duo and the DLZ Creator XS, but my take should apply to the bigger siblings as well. Over the last couple of months, I spent about a month using the Rodecaster and another month using the DLZ. I'll compare them, share my thoughts, and let you know which one I'm probably going to stick with for my live streams and YouTube videos. This video really isn't meant to be a comprehensive review. It's more of a big picture comparison to help you decide which device is a better option for you. So let's get started. The whole thing started a few months ago when my audio interface died. I needed something to use while I was waiting to get my Apollo interface repaired. I'd picked up both the Duo and the DLZ last year during Black Friday, but I really hadn't used them. I figured this was a good opportunity to do so. During the month-long test for each device, I used each one of them for live streams and recording all of the videos I did during that time period, as well as routing all of my computer audio through them to my audio monitors. The bottom line is that either of these devices are more than capable in most everyday contexts. There's no discernible difference in audio quality on the recordings or through the monitors. However, there is one issue you need to be aware of if you're using headphones. The Rodecaster, it doesn't always play well with low output headphones. Most of the headphones I tried, I think 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5, they had a high level of white noise, even when I had the volumes, everything turned to minimum. I found a solution online, but it requires buying a $10 noise isolator. I made a video about it, and I'll link to it in the description if you want to watch that. I find it curious that Rode would use such a bad headphone preamp in a device that costs this much. The only other device that I have that has that particular issue is the Elgato XLR dock, which is essentially a $100 audio interface. The DLZ, it doesn't have this issue, but thing to be aware of is this won't be an issue with all headphones, but it is something you should be aware of in case you get a Rodecaster, you plug in your headphones, and you hear noise right out of the box. But outside of this, there is no discernible difference in audio quality. Not in recordings, not in what comes out of speakers, not in what goes out to live streams. During my tests, I was primarily using a Shure SM7B, which many of you probably know is the mic that puts a preamp, any kind of a preamp, to the test. It needs a lot of clean gain, and pair that mic with my pitifully quiet voice, and it's a really good test. Both of these devices, they have more than enough gain to power the SM7B with my voice. At the levels I need for a live stream, I started getting a little bit of noise, but it's not really noticeable if you have the mic positioned well. When it comes to the preamps, headphone, the audio quality of these devices, I do have to give the edge to the DLZ here, but only because it doesn't have the headphone noise issue that the Rodecaster does. Let's move on to one of the areas where these two devices are maybe a little more noticeably different, and that's with the device itself. They're both small, but they have different form factors. The Duo with its faders, it's a taller device. The DLZ with its big touchscreen is wider. The Duo has what I'd probably describe as a soft push power button, while the DLZ has a more traditional rocker switch. Personally, I prefer the rocker switch, I've seen some people who prefer the power button on the Roadecasters because it can't be bumped and turned off accidentally. It's something to be aware of. When it comes to the power supply, the Rodecaster uses a simple USB-C connector, while the DLZ, it has a locking style plug. I prefer the security of the locking plug on the DLZ. Both devices have touchpads for sound effects. That's not something I really use, so I'm not going to go into any kind of detail on those. The main difference here between the two is that the Duo uses faders and the XS uses knobs. I don't find one to be better than the other. I'm just as comfortable using faders as I am with knobs. I do wish that the faders and knobs were detinted to let us know where unity gain is, but that's not a deal breaker at all. It doesn't impact anything. It would just be a nice little touch to be able to quickly and without looking at the device get things set back to unity. The next thing that really separates these two devices is the setup. Setting up the DLZ, for me, it was easy. Mackie has a good, informative, and sometimes it's a humorous and snarky manual. The large touchscreen makes it easy to set up, and every setting is usually only one touch from where you are at any given time. They also have 3 different modes when you first turn it on. There's, I think, an easy mode and a pro mode, and then there's a mode in between the two. I forget the name of it. They're there to help you get up and running quickly. If you're someone new to these types of equipment, easy mode is going to get you up and running pretty quickly, but the one thing to be aware of is you may not have access to some of the more advanced features that live streamers may want, and these may not be hidden in other modes. I set it up in Pro mode since I'm familiar with audio equipment, and I didn't have any problems setting up the DLZ. The Duo, on the other hand, I did find it to be more challenging to get set up and use. Unlike the DLZ, most settings aren't one menu or one tap away. Usually you're 2 or 3 menus away from most of the settings. And the menu system, to me, isn't very intuitive. I found myself needing to consult with the manual a number of times, but manual probably isn't quite the right term here. It's more of a series of web pages, which, to me, it's not an adequate replacement for a manual. It's more difficult to find the information I'm looking for, and even more challenging to try to find something I'd already found, but trying to go back and find it a second time, figuring out which section it might be in. It was a frustrating process for me. But the good news is, once you have everything set up, you shouldn't have to deal with the menus and the user interface very much. You'll use the sliders and the panel itself for most of your everyday adjustments. A few other differences here is the DLZ, it has a physical record button, while the Duo uses the touchscreen to start and stop recordings. The other big one is that the XS has an additional pair of 1/4-inch inputs. This could be used to connect outboard gear or a standalone preamp, and this input does bypass the preamps. And that's a nice touch for anybody who might want to incorporate some kind of outboard hardware processing, whether that's a channel strip or a compressor, an EQ. It's a lot easier to accomplish that with the DLZ. Another thing is that the angle of the touchscreen, or yeah, I guess it's a touchscreen on both devices, but the angle on the touchscreen on the DLZ, it just makes it easier to read the screen from more angles because it's raised up a little bit higher. It's a little more of a struggle to read on the Rodecaster because it lays a little bit flatter. And the last feature that the DLZ offers that you won't find on the Duo or the Rodecasters is the auto mix function. What that does is it reduces channel levels when there isn't an active signal on it. So when you're recording with others in person, it will turn down the volume of the people who aren't speaking. And it does this in real time, and it works really well. This helps by lowering the noise floor, and it focuses the audio on the person who is talking. Otherwise, these two devices are pretty similar in features. They both have two XLR line-in preamps, a pair of quarter-inch headphone ports, and a quarter-inch or a pair of quarter-inch monitor outputs. It's worth noting that the line inputs of the Rodecaster don't bypass the preamps, but that's something that isn't going to be an issue for 99% of you. One thing that the Rodecaster offers that the DLZ doesn't is MIDI control. This can be used to control other hardware, but that hardware has to be MIDI controllable. Both devices can record internally to memory cards, as well as send the audio out to a computer for multi-track recording. Now, let's talk quickly about connecting these to your computer. The Rodecaster has two USB-C ports, which is a nice touch, but it adds some complexity to the setup because each port has different uses and functionality. I'm not going to go into all of the details here because the manual is helpful in describing all of this, and I talk about these options in my review of the Rodecaster, which I'll link to in the description. On top of this, even when using the primary USB port, the Rodecaster shows up as two different audio devices on your computer, and this could cause some confusion about which one to use. Again, I'm not going to go into all of the details here because it's covered in my review, but the short version is the chat device is meant to be used for chats. When you have something like Zoom, Riverside, OBS, Discord, or anywhere else where you're having two-way communications with others. The other device is going to be your multi-track device. When it comes to the audio processing, these two offer pretty similar options. Personally, I don't recommend using the built-in processing unless you're using it for live streaming. For streamers, a little compression, EQ, de-essing, and noise gate goes a long way. But if you're editing your content, I feel that plugins give a lot more flexibility and tend to sound better than the built-in processing. But it's your call. And it's worth noting, at least with the Rodecaster, that monitoring latency can become an issue when using some of the audio processing. And I don't know if that is only with specific types of processing or if it applies to all of it. I just know that when I first set it up and put my headphones on, there was a significant amount of latency. And by latency, what I mean is when I talk, what I hear in my headphones is delayed slightly from when I speak it. So I speak, and then probably a split second later, I hear it in my headphones. But it's delayed just enough that it becomes distracting because I'm hearing words after I say them. And for a lot of people, that can be very distracting. There might be some people out there that it doesn't bother them with, but I'm definitely not one of them. Either way, that latency went away when I turned off all of the processing. I didn't experience this with the DLZ but that doesn't mean that latency isn't an issue with their processing. It just means I didn't experience it. And if I didn't mention something here, it's because I either didn't use it or because the two are very similar in that regard. Overall, I have to give the win to the DLZ for usability, layout, and design. Everything can be quickly accessed, and everything of importance can be quickly adjusted with one of the knobs on the device. For me, it was much easier to set up and find everything that I needed quickly. Let me pause things real quick and ask that if you're enjoying this video, that you give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of my content. Personally, I feel like the DLZ has a lot to offer. For my use, I like the DLZ a lot better. I feel it is the better product across the board. The user interface is as good as it gets for something like this. I know that Rode bought Mackie last year, or maybe it was the year before, but my hope is that Mackie can teach them a thing or two about the UI, because that is my biggest complaint with the Rodecaster. That and them cheaping out on the headphone amp. I will be doing a review of the DLZ XS soon, and I'll link to it in the description once it's done. And here's the curveball though. I'm probably going to put the Rodecaster Duo back into use, and it's for one specific reason. It's MIDI control. This is something that isn't going to be a big deal for a lot of people, but for me, it allows me to assign the faders to the individual channels on my audio interface, giving me real-time volume control I don't have otherwise. So instead of having to go into an application and adjust the volume, I can put together groups, send like all of my DAWs, all of my audio editing or video editing programs to one channel and have a single fader that adjusts that. I can have a fader that controls the volume of the audio for all of my web browsers. Have another fader to control the level of Apple Music. So that right there gives me additional functionality that the DLZ doesn't. And that's a pretty big quality of life boost for my day-to-day life. And that's the only reason I'm choosing the Rodecaster as my day-to-day mixer for my live streams and videos. Having said that, if Mackie adds MIDI control to the DLZ, I will switch back to it in a heartbeat. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.